Hey folks, what's up? This is Adam here. I can't see the guy. Right, we continue with the Karate Kid franchise. Thanks for checking out my previous reviews on the first Karate Kid movie and its amazing sequel, in my opinion, Karate Kid Part 2. You know, the sequel where it really was like how a sequel should have been made, you know, stepping up the game, and Daniel LaRusso defending his life in Okinawa, learning more about Mr. Miyagi's background and all that kind of stuff. The first one's a masterpiece, don't get me wrong. You know, Daniel learning karate from Mr. Miyagi, you know, in unique ways like painting the fence, wax on, wax off, and basically standing up to bullies in the tournament. You know, second one, you know, really did step up its game, and some people say the second one's better than the first movie. You know, I'd find it hard to argue with them. Please check out those reviews. But now we get to Karate Kid Part 3. A lot of problems with this. You're either going to love the movie or you're going to hate the movie. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't love this movie, but at the same time I didn't hate it either. I understand everyone's reasons for hating on this movie. I understand it 100%. If everyone says to me this movie was a disgrace, you know, I would agree with them to a certain extent, but here's the thing, we're all different, you know, there's different things that make us hate and love movies and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I grew up with the Karate Kid movies, especially the first three. You know, a little bit of background story about me. When I was a kid, I did karate myself. I held a brown belt, you know, and I got into the Karate Kid movies, so I grew up loving them as my childhood favourite movies, especially the first two. And of course, when I saw Part 3, it was nice to see Ralph Macchio come back as Daniel LaRusso, despite his character being like, I don't know how old he was in this movie. I could soon check this out, but apparently he was getting old in this movie. I mean, especially for the character. Karate Kid Part 3. I'm just looking at it right now. Yeah, he was 27 years old in this film, despite his character only being 18 years of age. So he was a 27-year-old playing an 18. He was a 27-year-old actor playing an 18-year-old character. So many people say he was too old for the role by now. But it was nice to see them come back. Right off the bat, Ralph Macchio, who played Daniel, he said he did not like this movie. Anytime when he's interviewed or asked questions about Q&A from fans, they always seem to ask him about the first movie more than the other Karate Kid movies. Part 2 does come up, but he never seems to like to talk about Part 3. He says it was a shitty script, and all the other Karate Kid fans agree with that also. I'm going to go through this review now, talking about the plot, but along the way I'll go along where I think the problems took place. Okay. Right off the bat, I'll begin with the opening. I mean, the opening will see Martin Cove playing Sensei John Kreese. He's depressed. He's lost all of his students, and the Cobra Kai dojo is now closed down, and he's going into some money problems. He goes to see an old friend called Terry Silver, who was a mixed martial artist himself, and he was a Vietnam friend, basically. Terry Silver basically is vowing to get revenge on Daniel and Mr. Miyagi for what they did to John Kreese. So he takes him to the airport to take him to Tahiti, and he vows that he's going to get vengeance for him. You know what I mean? Now, the Terry Silver character, a lot of people complain about his character with his goofy laugh, his over-the-top cheesiness. You know, they say he's like this cheesy James Bond villain. I didn't have a problem with Terry Silver. I thought he did fine. I mean, he would annoy some people with his laugh and his over-exaggeration. Boy, I like that, Johnny. Oh, I'm going to use that. You know, and this is while he was taking a bath. You know what I mean? You know, there's loads of goofy scenes in this movie where he'd crack up laughing or do his best to be irritated. And to some viewers, he really pulled it off. But I didn't have a problem with Terry Silver. I like the character. I mean, during this time, Daniel and Mr. Miyagi come back from Okinawa. They discover that the hotel that they're staying at has been demolished, so they've lost their home and their jobs. You know, they're moving out all the bonsai trees back to Mr. Miyagi's home. During where a conversation takes place where Mr. Miyagi says his dream is to open a bonsai store after he retires and all that, but he has struggled with money for a deposit. Daniel is starting college soon, but he wants to use the money to open up this bonsai store for Mr. Miyagi because he feels Mr. Miyagi has done everything for him. He feels like he wants to repay him for everything that he's done to him by helping him with the deposit for a bonsai store, basically, instead of using it towards college education. You know, during this time, Terry Silver is looking for ways how he can get Daniel into a tournament and embarrass him in front of like a crowd of people. You know, he wants to make him suffer and embarrass him, basically. So he hires this tournament terror, Mike Barnes. You know, who's very experienced in karate, knows what he's doing. Tournament terror, basically, he's called. Now, here's the thing about the Mike Barnes character. He was okay, but I felt in this movie that I was trying to make him like the meanest bad guy out of all three of the films combined. And in my opinion, that did not work. I mean, Johnny in the first movie was a bully, played his role off well, he was good for what it was. You had Chozan, who in my opinion was the most evil character in Karate Kid Part 2. But that was about Daniel trying to defend his life against Chozan. It wasn't about points, it was about defending his life. So we go from that to a step down, in my opinion, to Mike Barnes, who basically is just being paid to take Daniel's title in a tournament, you know. And it wasn't really much of a tournament because the ending in the tournament itself, Daniel didn't really have to go through rounds or a group of other people. He only had to fight in the final round. It wasn't really much of a tournament. So it was a step down in terms of why all this was taking place, you know. Going from dealing with bullies, going from defending his life, all the way down to blackmail, basically. Because this is what it was all about, blackmail. Because throughout the film, it's Mike Barnes and his friends trying to blackmail Daniel into signing an application to accept the tournament, basically. There's a scene where they go into the shop, trash the shop. There was a scene where, the cliff scene, where Daniel and Jessica are... you know, trying to get the bonsai tree from Mr. Miyagi, and they get stuck at the bottom of the cliff, and, you know, he signs the application, you know, to accept the tournament so they can get out alive from the cliff, you know. And that's another thing I want to talk about, the romance. And I mean, you can tell a story about the romance in Part 1 and Part 2. I mean, Part 1, yeah, he had a crush on that girl, Elizabeth Shue's character, Ali, you know, who was the ex-girlfriend of the Cobra Kai leader, Johnny. That was a good love story. There was also a good love story in Part 2, you know, with him and Yuki. Yuki, sorry. Got it mixed up, that was Mr. Miyagi's girlfriend. I'm like, Kumiko. You know, that was a nice love story. But in this, it wasn't much of a love story. In fact, there was no love story there at all. I mean, the actress who played Jessica Andrews in Part 3, she was only a minor in this film. She was like 17 years of age, still a minor. Where Daniel in real life was like a 27-year-old playing an 18-year-old character. Now, apparently there was a bit of a dispute about it, but they tried to make these characters start off on a date, but then it ended up just being friendship, because when Daniel goes to take her out, she says that, you know, she's going to try and make a go of it with a boyfriend, so her and Daniel are just friends. So it's not really a love story, it's just friendship, you know. So in terms of a love telling story, that really lacked it, in my opinion. You know, she worked at this pot shop, you know, and, you know, because there's a scene where Daniel does buy a bonsai store from Mr. Miyagi, you know, where they deposit the money, and this store is across the road where she makes pots for the bonsai trees and all that. You know, I mean, in terms of karate fighting scenes, it's Daniel getting manhandled. I mean, a lot of people say, didn't Daniel learn anything from Mr. Miyagi in the first two movies? You know, he's defending his life in Part 2 and he succeeds, yet he can't get through this guy, Mike Barnes, in Part 3, who's basically kicking his ass all the time, and then it's making the Daniel character look weak. And at the end of the day, you know, they say You know, why has Daniel gone from a pussy all of a sudden? You know, he defended his life in part 2, and now here he is in part 3, looking like a weak character. You know, trying to rely on Mr. Miyagi again to train him, you know, up for this tournament that he was blackmailed into doing. You know, there's tension between Mr. Miyagi and Daniel because Mr. Miyagi won't train Daniel for the tournament. You know, Terry Silver, in his spare time, is trying to make Daniel come to him from all the training so he can train him wrong in the tournament. About all pain and all that. And that's another thing. Wouldn't the Daniel character be more smarter than this? Because he knows he's going to a Cobra Kai dojo and he knows about the history he's got with Cobra Kai. So why is he falling right into the trap? Wouldn't he, like, triggering his mind thinking, hang on, this guy's working in a Cobra Kai dojo. Surely it's all connected, you know. And he's a friend of John Kreese, who he said passed away earlier on in the movie. So wouldn't it make sense? So not only is it making the Daniel character look weak, but isn't it also making him a bit, you know, manipulative a bit? So I can understand why people have so many dibs and dabs of, you know, arguments in this movie. I can see it all coming, and I understand why people question it sometimes, because I, for one, can understand, you know, and I mean, I, for one, could have written a better script than this. I mean, Ralph Macchio said the script for this movie fucking sucked. And I agree with him to a certain extent. And other people would say this movie is some sort of like poorer version of the first movie just made again. And I agree where they're coming from. I mean, there's always one thing that I wish would have happened in a Karate Kid movie, but we never saw it happen. And that's Mr. Miyagi and Daniel working as a duo. Can you imagine what a good scene that would be if they were like doing karate on bullies or enemies, but working as a team? You know, a team scene where Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are fighting together to take on groups or gangs or whatever. That would have been more, you know, a more better scene. I wish I would have done that in a Karate Kid movie, where they're working together in a team. I mean, that would have been really interesting to see, but we never saw anything like that. You know, my favourite scene in the movie would have to be everyone else's scene that everyone talks about, and it was like the fight scene in the Cobra Kai dojo between Mr. Miyagi and Terry Silver. I mean, I suppose that would be because, again, it wasn't. It was nice. It was funny to see Mr. Miyagi fight Terry Silver in that sort of way, but really there wasn't much to say. I mean, he threw Mike Barnes into the wall, switching off the light switch. You know, he basically threw John Kreese to the ground after elbowing him a few times. And the back and forth scene between Mr. Miyagi and Terry Silver was good, but it didn't. I wish it would have lasted longer, because before he throws him into the mirror, he goes to fucking punch Mr. Miyagi, and Mr. Miyagi just grabs him and just throws him into a mirror, basically, and all the paint falls on him, and then he takes a mick out of him going, whoa, whoa, you know. Funny scene, I admit, but I wish I would have done more with the scene. You know, made it a little bit longer. You know, I mean, I know there's so much they could do with Mr. Miyagi because of his age and all that, but I wish that he would have had, you know, something more catchy. You know, that would have been a great scene for Daniel and Mr. Miyagi to work together, you know, in a team against Terry Silver, John Kreese, and, you know, Mike Barnes, you know, 2 against 3. That would have been an interesting scene to see, you know, working as a duo. Something we've never seen before. You know, that would have been really good. I mean, I suppose one major problem everyone has with this movie is the ending in the tournament. I mean, the ending in the tournament is nothing special. It's Daniel getting his ass beat by Mike Barnes throughout the whole night. You know, Terry Silver and Mike Barnes are having this conversation about get a point, lose a point, get a point, lose a point. You know, back and forth doing that. And we had some good endings. I mean, like in the first movie, it was Daniel using the crane kick on Johnny Lawrence. In the second one, it was all the jabs, wearing Chozan down to finish him off, ready to end his life. And then in this movie, all you get at the ending, I'm no kidding, is a kata. He does a kata in front of Mike Barnes, swings him over his head, punches him in the ribs, and he gets the point. And there's your tournament. So there's your big build-up, all that for that. And you think to yourself, really? That's it? You know, we were built up to see Daniel deliver one jab punch to Mike Barnes' ribs to get the point. So I will admit this movie has problems, a lot of fucking problems. I can understand why this movie got so much hate, but I didn't hate the movie. It's one of those movies where, don't get me wrong, it's my last pick. It's my last pick to watch out of all the Karate Kid movies. I'll watch part 1 any day. I'll watch part 2 any day. Part 3 will always be my last choice. That's excluding the next Karate Kid Part 4 starring Hilary Swank, and the remake I want nothing to do with. But it was a poor story, especially when you compare it to the first 2 movies. I mean, it says right here on the cover, the legacy continues. How? How does the legacy continue to get better and all that stuff? So, I didn't hate the movie. I can get a kick out of it in certain scenes, but all I'm saying is, it's my last pick. If you put all 3 of them movies in front of me right now and say, right, pick one to watch, it'll definitely either be the first or the second one. You know, this one will always be my last pick. You know, I do own it on Blu-ray just like all the others. Look what it says here on the cover. First it was teacher to student, then it was father to son, now it's man to man. That's what it says there. Look on the fucking front cover. I mean, I'll just read some facts about this movie so far. It's directed by John Gene Alverstein. Budget $12.5 million. Officially released in 1989 on June 30th. Yeah, even in terms of reception, it got negative reviews. And the director, John Alverstein, even he called this movie a poor imitation of the first one and a horrible movie. So even the director wasn't a fan of the work of this movie. So I suppose, yeah, Ralph Macchio's character was a little bit too old for this movie. That's why he didn't appear in part 4, so I was told, because he was too old to portray the character. But again, there were so many disappointing things about this movie, but didn't hate it. I could rant on different films, but I do get where people are coming from when they really put this movie down. So that's my review, everyone. Please like, rate, and comment this name if you've got any questions. That's Karate Kid Part 3. We'll move on to the next Karate Kid in the next review. Peace out.